Let's go!
Cool!
Hey everyone, it's 𝗏𝗀𝗃, and today... Wait. Okay, stop the music for a second. I know this is a K-free rants video, and I usually like to keep the background dark for the ranting mood, but let's switch it up this once to make things more fitting. Okay, that's better. Hey everyone, it's 𝗏𝗀𝗃, and welcome to a video that has been extremely long overdue to put out, not only for my own sake, but for the sake of the Kirby community, because today I'm going to express my personal thoughts and strong feelings about how the modern state of the Kirby franchise is very misunderstood by some. Now, this was a tough video to script out, because just like many of the other series I tend to cover, Kirby is one with a passionate fan base with very strong views on the games, and when it comes to clashing my opinions with others, it hasn't always been the best experience for me. Now with series like Sonic and Mario, I'm pretty much numb to dealing with those fandoms, so I don't even break a sweat making a video on them, whether it be a positive or a negative one. But Kirby is a bit of uncharted territory for me, because despite how much I love the series, I don't dedicate many videos exclusively to it. And it's not because I have problems with the series or anything, it's just because I've never felt this intense desire to discuss it more openly. Like with the formerly mentioned series, I tend to focus on a lot more. But I'm coming out of that shell today because I've wanted to make a rant video that defends the modern state of Kirby for a long time, which might sound weird at first when you consider how loved a lot of modern Kirby can be, but there's still sometimes labels placed onto it that I heavily disagree with. And if you follow me on other platforms like my Twitter or my Facebook, you'll see that I've been fighting against those labels for a hot minute. It's even gotten to a point where some fans get mad at me for my explanations and just claim I'm a dumb fanboy, which, yeah, that part of the discussion ain't so unfamiliar to me. Ah, angry fanboys, being absolutely obnoxious since the minute I discovered a way to discuss on the internet. But now that I've introduced the topic, let's get into the meat of things. So the main arguments that I want to argue against in this video are the ones that claim Kirby is a derivative, uninteresting series that has done nothing beyond decent since its inception. There's nothing that makes it any different from the new Super Mario Bros. Games, and this series truly hasn't been that revolutionary since Kirby Superstar, which, oh boy, wait till we come back to you, Kirby Superstar. Kirby in the Forgotten Land is the first Kirby game in years that is worth playing, and a lot of the series before that has no value. Now, you might think that I'm exaggerating all of these arguments and just taking big criticisms of the modern Kirby state and piling them into one thing. And in some aspects, I am, because I really want to highlight how it all sounds when you combine the arguments and how inconsistent they feel next to things Kirby as a series has actually done. Because while Kirby is most definitely not as perfect a series as some of its fans will claim, I would argue that it's far from this bland, cutesy 2D Mario wannabe like some people will have you believe. To make things simple, let's start from the top question. Is Kirby as a series truly derivative and uninteresting? And in order to answer that, we also have to ask, where did this argument even come from? Now, if this were an argument asked a few years ago, with many games feeling absolutely dead similar between each other for years on end, I would understand it. As again, we all know how dry and soulless 2D Mario, and even Mario as a whole, became, because of how much the new Super Mario Bros. Identity just consumed everything. But in the case of Kirby, I don't think that's the case. People say Kirby got stuck doing the same thing from either Superstar and onwards, or from Return to Dreamland and onwards. But if you spend time, actually looking at the content of the games, instead of assuming they are all the same ones just because of similar elements in gameplay, you would see that many Kirby games have things that stand them out. Kirby games don't have the exact same gameplay core between them. Kirby games don't use the exact same environment themes in almost the exact same order. And they especially don't have the exact same premise every time. A game like Kirby Dream Land 3 is distinct because it has an entirely different art style from other games, and a focus on side missions apart from beating the main levels. Building on Dreamland 2's gameplay foundations, yes, but shaking up a lot of what that game had established. A game like 𝗃𝗄𝗃 is distinct from Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, because while 𝗃𝗄𝗃 is a straightforward Kirby experience in a lot of ways, it has unique elements such as its bubble mechanics and its focus on hunting out treasure chests. Meanwhile, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror straight up takes Kirby to a new genre, being more of a Metroidvania inspired game. While the absolute core of Kirby's moveset and gameplay has remained very similar between each other, I feel like the mainline games have done a good job of making every game feel like its own game. I brought up this same point with Pokemon. Despite how the core of the series has always been the same, it doesn't mean that every game is the exact same. It's really stupid to me to see a series as derivative just for retaining the core gameplay that defines the entire series in the freaking first place. Do people say Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3 are the same game just because they're all 2D platformer Mario games? No! Do they say this even with games like the Mario Land ones having similar gameplay? No. I feel like it's so hypocritical of Nintendo fans especially to place this label on Kirby for having 2D games that are similar between each other, but praising every single 2D Mario game as a unique experience, especially when it comes to the new Super Mario Bros. Games. Which, speaking of them, I shouldn't even have to explain this, but unlike the current state of 2D Mario, Kirby has done a better job at making each game feel different, even if they're a traditional 2D platformer. I already gave some examples above, but let's go deeper with theming and story, because when it comes to that, Kirby does a better job with it. Some people say that every game is the same in theming and story in the sense that the plots boil down to Kirby being interrupted from his sleep for a meal to go fight the demon of the week that wandered into Dreamland. And yeah, while that summarizes many of the overall stories of the series, that's not exactly how every freaking story plays out. That'd be like saying every Mario story is the same because Mario always goes on a big adventure. What helps every Kirby game feel different is how each game has a different identity through story, music, and theming. Kirby Triple Deluxe is a really good example for this case, because I know how folks love to use the Return to Dreamland formula games specifically in the derivative argument. Kirby Triple Deluxe focuses on Kirby traveling to a mystical world that's high above Dreamland in order to get King Dedede back from being kidnapped. What? Dedede isn't the end goal bad guy of almost every freaking game like Bowser is? That's crazy. But yeah, the theming of that game leaned a lot more into the mystical and nature side of things, because that's where the game took place. They even named the new kingdom and gave it a lot of depth, such as the fact that it's been ruled by a tyrannical bee queen for a hot minute. And the reason Dedede was snatched is because the bee queen's goons feared that her subjects would call upon the lower world hero, Kirby, to stop her. But that's the clever thing. they figured Dedede was the hero of the lower world, considering he's the big king and all. Now, is it the deepest storytelling ever? No. But for a 2D platformer, it's a nice addition that helps this game not feel like the exact same as the others. This game has different antagonists from other games, a different vibe, a different type of approach for its music to reflect the game's own energy, and etc. Like, I don't know how much more clearly I can paint this picture. Compare this to the new Super Mario Bros. Games, where you're always just venturing to get Princess Peach from Bowser. You're always fighting the Koopalings as the main bosses with very few changes. You're always traveling between a grass and desert world, then going into a forest, water, ice, mountain, and sky world, and ending things off at a lava-themed world run by Bowser. The new Super Mario Bros. Games don't do things exactly the same, but they just change up so little between each other, that's why they feel like the same game. So it's bizarre to see that label slapped onto Kirby when it clearly doesn't go by tropes like that. Now, does that mean Kirby has absolutely no repetitive tropes at all? No. There's quite a few that people like to point to, such as Wispy Woods being a recurring boss fight, or King Dedede being possessed in order to create a new King Dedede themed boss fight. But I feel like people really reach hard with using those as points for the games being derivative. Yes, King Dedede sadly does get possessed a lot, to an almost bizarre degree. And yes, Wispy just loves coming back to make trouble. But not all of their fights are the exact same between their appearances. The Wispy Woods fight in Robobot alone is a great example, because here, we have Wispy being an absolute Terminator after getting roboticized. And for Dedede, let's just say that he can get a bit creative too.
Look at it! Look at it! Look at it! I want all of you to look at it!
But yeah, I think I can safely say that I've finally beaten this argument to death in video form, and I can finally move on from it after this video is done. Because man, am I tired of arguing about it. So that's going to bring us to our next topic, which is talking about where this argument even freaking came from and what triggered it. And this is where things are gonna get really spicy, because we're going to be talking about the game that really set off all the debates in full force, being Kirby Star Allies. Now normally, while many people have their opinions on Kirby games, the discussion around most games is pretty chill compared to others, as mainline Kirby games tend to be pretty good. But Star Allies has a very divisive reputation, where more than any other Kirby games, people fight constantly about whether it's a good game, a bad game, an uninteresting mediocre game, and etc. And I feel like this game's divisiveness is what led to a lot of the narratives of Kirby being an uninspired franchise. Because Star Allies was a very bland and boring game to some people, clearly that must mean every mainline Kirby is uninteresting too, right? Which you probably don't need to guess how I feel about that idea. But what I'm sure that you're all interested in is my thoughts on Kirby Star Allies. And if you followed me for a hot minute, you will know that I do like Star Allies, and think that some of its negative conversation is so blown out of proportion. But there are a lot of legitimate criticisms towards the game that I do understand. What? You can like a game and still acknowledge its shortcomings? Revelation of the goddamn century there, I know. Now, I don't want to turn this into a full-on Star Allies review, because then we'd be here for even longer than whatever this video's final runtime is. But I do want to take the time to highlight how in some ways, the game is not as bad as people say. And this is the part I've dreaded tackling for a long time, because the discussion around this game can get to near Sonic game discussion levels of obnoxious. Now, why do I like Star Allies? In a lot of ways, I think it is a beautiful love letter to the entire Kirby franchise that celebrates almost every single little corner of mainline Kirby, even giving a bit of love to the spin-offs and other media. The fan service of this game is top tier, bringing back long beloved characters, some we haven't seen in ages, having amazing remixes of the series' best music, and having some of the most insane revelations when it comes to the overall story of this universe. It also not only has the most abilities in a single game yet, choosing some of the most GOAT of them, but allowed for these cool ability combinations that made the game even more fun to mess around with. The game also has a beautiful art style with a lot of detail given to the world, the animations, and other areas. And in many ways, it does indeed build from its previous installments. I just cannot process how people can look at this game, even on its surface level, and say it's just a lazy cash grab game that HAL made. It feels just as passionate as many of the other games in the series, and I just disagree with it being a bad game for these reasons. But now, let's turn the tables and focus on the negatives. Because while there's quite a few that I actually agree with, I do have some things to say about others. And believe it or not, the first major argument of this game that I have to argue against is its mere existence as a 2D platformer. That's right, a lot of the outrage of this game comes from the fact that it's yet another 2D Kirby platformer out of so many others, and that the series was in a quote-unquote new Super Mario Bros. Phase because modern Kirby produced 4 of them with the Return to Dreamland formula. And words can't describe how stupid I think this one is. Now, in some ways, I get where this stigma came from, as like with the new Super Mario Bros. Games, 4 2D platformers back to back that play virtually the same in core gameplay is a bit much. And when Star Allies was revealed, I even agreed with the idea that after Star Allies, it would probably be best to move Kirby in a fresh new direction, as Kirby had been so overdue for a 3D game, it wasn't even funny. But to say that Star Allies was the exact same game as Return to Dreamland, Triple Deluxe, and Planet 𝗵𝗂𝗏, and that it offered nothing unique to this series, yeah, no. These games have very different main gimmicks, different music, different characters at their center, and different themes. So at the end of the day, they are all unique games with their own strengths and weaknesses, with the major thing in common being their raw, core gameplay. Which, when you compare them to how the new Super Mario Bros. Games differ from each other, it's honestly laughable people would make that comparison in the first place. I mean, the fact this game is the first HD mainline game alone was a big deal. Some of you may be familiar with how annoyed I was with 𝗵𝗵𝗆𝗃 being the first HD Kirby revealed, and ending up as the only major Wii U Kirby game. This game's reveal was so overdue to me. So say what you will about Kirby having so many 2D platformers, but not every series needs to push their mainline games into some Breath of the Wild tier masterpiece immediately. That's not to say 3D Kirby or some massive shaking up wasn't overdue, but it's stupid to write off a game as bad for just being 2D or 3D. If even I can swallow my annoyance for classic Sonic briefly overtaking Sonic the Hedgehog's modern direction to say Sonic Mania was a good game, you guys will be alright. God, what a stupid argument that just felt like such a waste of time to even argue against. So now, let's get into the real arguments. One of the smaller complaints was the game running at 30 FPS, when the 3DS games ran at 60 FPS, which, not gonna lie, yeah, I don't know what happened there. I think that's a valid criticism, and hopefully HAL gets better with frame rate in future mainline games. But is it some argument that just makes the game absolutely trash to me? No. But with every time I talk frame rate, I feel like I'll put a red dot on my head. But now it's time to get to the two biggest arguments against Star Allies, being its difficulty and its extremely infamous approach to free content updates. In terms of difficulty, Kirby Star Allies is one of the easiest games in the series, between heavily encouraging the player to use helper CPUs that make the game's enemies and puzzles into a joke, the Dream Friends having very well detailed but insanely busted movesets, the AI and boss movesets not being the most challenging, etc. There is no denying that Star Allies is a lot easier of a game than others, and I won't lie, this is a valid criticism too, because the game can be stupid easy to play a lot of the time. One could argue that they wanted to warm the game up to newcomers and kids, as Kirby, like other Nintendo series at the end of the day, is geared towards younger audiences. But I'm not a person who thinks that is an excuse. I hate when people say that because something is for younger people, it needs to be easier or have less depth, as it's not impossible to have options to make the game more challenging for those who want it. Heck, being easy and simple is even in the roots of Kirby as a series, and it's not like Nintendo is known for challenging games all the time anyway. Look at Mario. Mario is now the series I would say is the pinnacle of challenging gameplay. So it's funny to me people will use him as a comparison when talking about Kirby's difficulty. But with all of that said, I feel like it didn't need to be as easy as it ended up being. Now, does this make the game bad to me? No. But I won't lie that it does make it a game that's not as replayable sometimes, especially when it comes to the basic main campaign. And the thing is, this game does have some extra modes and options that give the game a lot of that extra depth. But this unfortunately spirals into the biggest issue of Star Allies, which is how the game relied a lot on free content updates. This is probably the thing that made Star Allies so low quality to people the most, because the game when it first launched and the game it is now are almost two different games. Remember how I said Star Allies relies a lot on that nostalgic charm for its theming and uniqueness? Well, when it first launched, it only had a few of those Dream Friends, and it didn't have some of those more challenging modes. The game made a bad first impression with a lot of people from this, and if you weren't a massive Kirby fan, the nostalgic angles probably didn't do as much for you. Which is why I could see why people outside the Kirby spectrum especially felt more bitter towards it. I'm going to break my defense position fully for once and say I think HAL and Nintendo dropped the ball here. The game should have launched with all of its content from the jump, as while the hype around the game's daily updates was appealing and fun in its own way, there's no denying that a game lacking features wasn't a good look. However, I will say that this doesn't diminish the overall final state of the game. The new content that was added ended up being substantial and good, and I'd say that Kirby Star Allies in the end is a good game with a lot of value to it. And it annoys me when I still see comments using the game as some big argument to modern Kirby sucking right now, when that isn't further from the case, especially when other modern Kirby games don't have that fatal of a flaw. Yes, the game relies a lot on Kirby throughout his history, but that is in no way a bad thing. I wish 2D Mario and 2D Sonic as series paid more love and respect to their entire brand, instead of pretending a handful of games are the only ones that happen. And if Star Allies is considered a bad game for Kirby standards, then shoot, I sure as hell wish a series like Sonic's worst games were on that standard. but I still can't deny that Nintendo, HAL, or whoever decided this setup for Star Allies deserved the backlash from this, as using free updates to improve a content lacking game later isn't a good approach to video games. It's almost as bad as some of gaming's worst other habits, and it's a habit Nintendo needs to break. But with that, my Star Allies argument is done. Is Kirby Star Allies better than the 3DS duo of Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot, or on par with the greatness that is Superstar Ultra and Return to Dreamland to me? No. But is it a bad game? No. And it's not a point towards modern Kirby being bad or mediocre, as ever since the game's divisive reception, I've seen a lot of people use it to bash the modern direction of the series, claiming that Kumazaki, the current director of it, isn't a good director for Kirby, and that he should even be fired in place of Sakurai handling Kirby again. And whoo boy, do I have some words for this, because that's going to bring me to my final point for this video, being my defense for Kumazaki's handling of Kirby and how people using Sakurai to bring him down especially are some of the biggest fucking clowns I've ever dealt with. Now, there's no denying how important Sakurai is to Kirby. I mean, he freaking created him. There would be no Kirby without him. And his contributions to the series should never be undermined. But to treat him as the sole life force of this series would be foolish to say the least. As while he's been with Kirby for many major steps of the series' life, he eventually left it due to sequelization, which is funny to think about when you consider that he went on to spend a lot of time with Super Smash Bros. As a series. But anyway, because of him leaving, Kirby felt like he was in a dry limbo state for a while, having some new games, sure, but not having a definitive voice to really give the series a strong sense of identity. I mean, just look at all the canceled Kirby games in that period. But this man, this soul right here, is what really brought Kirby together as a brand again, making the masterpiece we know as Return to Dreamland and using it to reshape the series, while still acknowledging the roots of this series and not being disrespectful to what the people before him did. You know that amazing looking 3D Kirby game coming out? If it weren't for Kumazaki, we might not have it, or at least the game in the form that it is in, because Kumazaki and his team have put in overtime work to keep Kirby a great and consistent series. And just because of Star Allies' missteps, that should not be taken away from. It's just stupid to say that Sakurai was the only person to do something revolutionary with Kirby when Kumazaki has been keeping this series great for all these years. I'd go as far as to say that what he did with Return to Dreamland expanded Kirby past the original Superstar, making it an overall better game.
Squidward.
Yeah, I said it. Kirby Superstar is a great game to me still, but its remake is better, and the Return to Dreamland formula also steps beyond it. If anything, sometimes it feels like Sakurai hurts the series more than helps it, as rather than focus on acknowledging the evolution of it in the biggest Nintendo crossover, he uses Smash Bros. To just focus on the Kirby games he made. And while I can understand his mindset due to being away from the brand for a hot minute, it's no excuse to be representing modern Kirby so poorly by gimping it out on its music remixes, not having a new Kirby character in Smash since freaking King Dedede, and all the other little BS things that I've ranted about when it comes to Kirby and Smash. In a nutshell, Sakurai and many of the nostalgia-biased folks of Kirby need to put respect on Kumazaki's name. Your era was great, but don't use it to disrespect those who have also worked hard. And with that, I have officially argued all of my points in regards to how modern Kirby is misunderstood. I didn't touch on every single little thing, but I think I've rambled enough. My conclusion is just that Kirby as a series has always shined beyond mediocrity before Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. And while I'm excited for that game too, I'm not going to use it to disrespect Kirby games that came before it, especially when those games are the freaking reason we have it. But before I end this video off, I want to let a friend of mine add his 2 cents onto the topic as well, as he's also very passionate about this topic. And I figured that I should show that I'm not the only one in feeling this way. Ladies and gentlemen, here's an excerpt from Platt, giving his thoughts on all this. Oh yeah, and I'll be reading this, since Platt preferred not to speak. When it comes to modern Kirby, the stigma surrounding it is very strange. People who are big fans of the Kirby series tend to love the modern games, while people who just pick up and play a Kirby game every once in a while, or just know of Kirby from Smash Bros. Or somewhere else, often see the modern games as very underwhelming. It's hard to tell why these games are so polarizing, to be honest. With Star Allies, it's easy to see why, since most of the game's big crazy features are only super cool if you're already a Kirby fan. Seeing the long-awaited return of Adeline or 𝗵𝗵𝗹𝗁, now as playable characters, and also the crazy amount of lore and loose ends that were tied up with the final boss, were things that Kirby fans previously only dreamed of. Though Star Allies was a game made to celebrate Kirby's history, so it only makes sense that the main draw to the game was the fan service. However, with the previous 3 modern titles, I think it goes back to what Nux talked about earlier. People for whatever reason see these games in the same light as the new Super Mario Bros. Games. From an onlooker's perspective, the games do look samey. I can't blame people for thinking this, because unless you're watching a full walkthrough of the games, the few clips that most people show of them tend to look very similar. But a few clips just don't give these games justice. From the super abilities and another dimension chase downs in Return to Dreamland, to the introduction of foreground and background level design with 3D puzzles in Triple Deluxe, to the overhaul of character designs and the craziness of the Robobot armor in Planet Robobot, these games are just too different to be classified as the same game made over and over again. This was mentioned earlier, but I think the best way to explain Kirby is by using Wispy Woods as an example. If you just look at a picture of Wispy from each game, or watch a few seconds of each fight, he looks pretty much the same in all of them. But once you watch/play the entire fight, you'll see how different each Wispy encounter is. After the first half of the fight in nearly every Kirby game, Wispy Woods changes up how he fights and does something completely different. Whether that be getting up and running at you in Dreamland 3, getting bigger and inhaling you in Return to Dreamland, jumping in and out of the foreground and background in Triple Deluxe, or being entirely mechanized and shooting rockets in Planet Robobot. Wispy is always different. Honestly, it's a testament to how good HAL is at making these games that they managed to make a tree fight differently in each installment. But it's just like the Kirby series in general. One glance at it, especially the modern games, and it's easy to think, yeah, these games are pretty much all the same. But once you start playing them for yourself and get past the first few tutorial-esque levels, it's so blatantly apparent that each game has its own feel, its own charm, and many differences from the others to warrant the game's existence in the first place. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. Thank you, Nux, for letting me add my 2 cents here, and to everyone watching, subscribe to his channel. No, thank you very much for your thoughts, Platt, and please be sure to follow his social media in the description below. But I am officially tapped out on Kirby talk for today, so it's time to end this video. If you've made it to this point of the video, thank you for watching all the way until the end. What are your thoughts on Kirby's modern direction? Did my mad rambling make any sense to you? Are you looking forward to Kirby's first 3D adventure if you haven't already played it? Let me know in the comments below. And be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new to it, and follow my additional social media such as my Twitter for more content and updates. This has been 𝗏𝗀𝗀, and I'm out. Peace.